Ubuntu just replaced the 44-year-old command that guards your root password. It swapped sudo for a Rust rewrite, and nothing about how you type it changed at all. A 16-year-old bug hiding in that same kind of code just proved exactly why the swap was worth making. What else in your stack changed and nobody told you?
Let's get into it.
In 1980, two students in a Buffalo computer lab wrote a small program called sudo, so nobody had to share the root password. It has run the same way ever since, until this year. This is the Hamberger Report. I'm Andreas Hamberger, Enterprise Architect, Wellington. That small program has guarded the root prompt on Unix and Linux systems for 44 years. The same C code, trusted, audited, and left alone. On the 3rd of July 2026, GNOME released version 51, codenamed Coruña, and buried in the release notes was a line that closes a chapter for anyone who fought bad graphics drivers on Linux. But the graphics fix is the small story. The large one is this: Ubuntu 26.04. The long-term release millions will run for years. Now ships with sudo replaced by sudo-rs, a ground-up rewrite in Rust as the system default. The syntax is identical. Your sudo-rs file works untouched. Nothing about how you use it changed. What changed sits underneath, and the reason is not fashion. Roughly 2/3 of serious kernel security bugs are memory safety mistakes. The kind where C lets a program touch memory it should never touch, and Rust is built so that mistake fails to compile instead of failing in production. If you ran Linux on NVIDIA graphics between about 2001 and 2012, you know the ritual. A kernel update would land, you would reboot, and the screen would come up broken, or not at all. I compiled more kernels than I can count, trying to coax a closed NVIDIA driver back into talking to a display that had worked perfectly the day before. That is the connection back to a Coruña. GNOME 51 drops the legacy NVIDIA graphics path on Wayland for good, committing fully to the open buffer path that AMD and Intel have always used. The replacement exists because a new open source NVIDIA driver called Nova is advancing hard in the current kernel cycle, maintained upstream by Red Hat's Danilo Krumrich, with NVIDIA itself contributing code. The proprietary extension I fought for a decade is retiring because the open alternative finally works. TimeSync is next in the queue. Canonical has become a gold sponsor of the foundation behind sudo-rs, committing 40,000 euros a year to fund ntpd-rs, a Rust rewrite of the time daemon, tested in Ubuntu 26.10 and lined up as default in 27.04, funded and scheduled, not yet shipped. A plan with money behind it is how sudo got here too. There is a fair question underneath all of this. Sudo works. It has guarded the root prompt for 4 decades. Why rewrite 40 years of hardened, audited code in a new language? The honest case for Rust used to be about reduction, not elimination. Fewer bugs, not no bugs. That framing is starting to shift, and I will show you exactly why in a moment. First, a date worth putting in your calendar. On Friday, the 28th of August, this channel's own permanent open source series, Free as in Theft, launches, picking up this same rewrite argument from the licensing side of the story, rather than the memory safety side. Put that date in your calendar now. Back to why bother when sudo already works and has for 4 decades. The old defense was statistical, rewrite enough of the C layer in Rust, and the bug count falls, release after release, without anyone changing how they use the machine day to day. That defense held for years on the strength of statistics alone. It stopped being only statistical. The week a bug with a name showed up, sitting quietly in code every one of us has been running for a very long time. The answer arrived wearing a bug name. In June 2026, kernel maintainers patched a flaw the security community called Januscape, a race condition in the part of Linux that runs virtual machines on nearly every cloud host on Earth. Under the right timing, a guest virtual machine can trick the host into mapping memory. The guest controls then escape its own boundary and run code as root on the host itself. A tenant in one apartment gets the keys to the whole building. Here is the detail that should stop any architect cold. That bug was written into the kernel back in 2010. It sat there, unnoticed, in essentially every Linux kernel shipped for 16 years, across both Intel and AMD processors in the exact code path that runs the world's cloud infrastructure, patched only this year with 2 coupled fixes that had to land together. This is not a theoretical risk invented to sell a language. It is the class of mistake a borrow checker refuses to compile. You cannot patch your way out of a class of bug sitting quietly in code everyone trusted. You can only design it out from the start. That is what this quiet rewrite is buying you. 16 years too late for comfort, but not too late to matter. For years, the honest case for memory-safe languages was reduction, not elimination. Fewer bugs, not no bugs. Google now reports 0 memory safety bugs in production from the Rust driver code running on Android 16 devices. I would qualify that carefully, and so does Google. It is a reported figure for the code shipped to date, not a mathematical proof that the bug class can never occur again. But there is a real difference between a class of bug you fight forever and a class of bug that has stopped appearing. None of this is a grassroots effort either. Sudo-rs and ntpd-rs both began inside a memory safety program before moving to their current foundation, and Canonical sponsorship brings real corporate money into the same coordinated push. I have spent 30 years watching organizations here in New Zealand defer known infrastructure risk because the system was running and nobody wanted to touch it. The default almost always ends the same way. Not with a considered upgrade on a quiet Tuesday, but with an outage, an incident report, and a scramble to replace under pressure what could have been replaced in calm. This is the opposite instinct at a much larger scale. The move to memory-safe foundations is no longer only an engineering preference. It has become a written expectation in government-adjacent software, and the paper trail runs through Washington. The procurement question follows the same line without needing to be forced. The United States Office of the National Cyber Director argued back in its February 2024 report that software makers should shift away from memory-unsafe languages. The National Security Agency had already published guidance recommending memory-safe languages, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency has pressed a memory-safe by design roadmap folded directly into software bill of materials expectations under a standing executive order. When a distribution ships sudo-rs by default, it is not only fixing a bug class inside its own codebase, it is meeting a procurement expectation that allied governments are actively writing into the software contracts they will sign. The occupants at dinner, in other words, include some very large institutions, reading the same release notes I read on the 3rd of July. GNOME 51 a Coruña is a small headline about a graphics extension being removed. What it actually signals runs through the entire stack, right down to the prompt you type into every single day. Sudo-rs is already the default in a long-term release. Millions will run for years. ntpd-rs is funded and scheduled. Nova is advancing in the current kernel cycle. The desktop has cut its last tie to the legacy proprietary graphics path. The language argument that ran for 30 years has effectively been settled at the institutional level. Rust is recognized as a memory-safe language by the major standards and security bodies, and the Android, Windows, and Linux kernels all now carry it in production. What remains is the long unglamorous work of implementation, and that work has now reached the prompt on your own machine, the one you type into without thinking about it every single day. The foundations are being repoured while the house stays occupied, one slab at a time, and most of the people living in it never notice the work being done underneath them. That is the highest compliment an infrastructure project can be paid.
That is the Hamberger report for today. If this was useful, subscribe and hit the like button. It helps more professionals find the channel. You will find links to everything we covered in the description below. I am Andreas Hamberger, and I will see you tomorrow.
Like and subscribe.